Bigfoot saved me from a serial killer. It was a chilly autumn evening in the dense forests of Washington state. The air carried an eerie stillness, broken only by the rustling leaves and distant hoots of owls. This is where Emily Carter found herself stranded after her car skidded off the narrow mountain road during a sudden downpour. Her heart pounded as she realized how far she was from civilization. Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Emily had always been adventurous, but this trip to the Pacific Northwest seemed different somehow. She had planned a solo camping adventure near Mount Rainier National Park, hoping to escape the chaos of city life. Little did she know that fate would lead her into something far more terrifying than she could ever imagine. As darkness fell over the forest, Emily decided to set up camp under the cover of ancient trees. The moonlight barely penetrated through the thick canopy above, casting long shadows across the forest floor. It was around 9:30 p.m. when she first heard it, a faint whisper carried by the wind. Then came the sound of footsteps, deliberate, slow, methodical. The hairs on her neck stood up as she noticed strange markings carved into nearby tree trunks, symbols she couldn't recognize. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was it some kind of ritualistic sign? Or perhaps just another camper's graffiti? But deep down, she felt uneasy. Something about these marks didn't feel right. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the woods as a branch snapped nearby. Emily froze. Her flashlight beam trembled as she scanned her surroundings. That's when she saw him, a figure standing at the edge of her light's reach, tall, thin, with glowing eyes that pierced through the darkness. He wasn't moving, just watching, waiting. Her instincts told her to run. But before she could gather her courage, another presence emerged from deeper within the forest. This one was different, massive, towering, covered in dark fur. Its form moved silently despite its size. Emily's breath caught in her throat as both figures locked eyes. For what felt like eternity, they simply stared at each other. Then it happened. The thin man lunged toward her. In that split second, everything changed. The large creature reacted faster than she thought possible. With a single powerful motion, it intercepted the attacker. What followed was a chaotic struggle between the two beings. Growls, snarls, and the chilling sound of bones breaking. Emily watched in disbelief as the mysterious beast fought fiercely to protect her. Though terrified, she couldn't help but notice how intelligent its movements were. Not animalistic, almost human-like. After what seemed like hours, but was likely mere minutes, the fight ended abruptly. The attacker lay motionless on the ground while the protector stood guard over Emily. Gathering her wits, she slowly approached the creature. To her astonishment, it allowed her close proximity. Without speaking, there was an understanding between them. A silent agreement that she wouldn't harm him if he kept her safe. They spent the night together under the watchful eyes of countless stars. The atmosphere shifted from fear to cautious gratitude. As dawn broke, the forest transformed dramatically. Golden sunlight filtered through the trees, chasing away the previous night's horrors. Emily knew she needed to leave. But so did her savior. Before parting ways, they shared one final moment of connection, an unspoken promise never to forget this encounter. Back in Seattle, days later, Emily tried returning to normal life. Yet something gnawed at her thoughts constantly. Who or what exactly saved her life that fateful night? And why did those symbols appear specifically around her campsite? Determined to find answers, she began researching local legends. Stories of Bigfoot sightings became increasingly familiar. Could her protector truly be one of these elusive creatures? But there was more, much more. As she dug deeper, disturbing patterns emerged regarding missing persons cases throughout the region. Each victim disappeared near similar symbol-marked areas. Coincidence? or evidence of something darker lurking in the shadows. Haunted by questions without answers, Emily vowed to uncover the truth, even if doing so meant risking another encounter with either her savior or its deadly adversary. Because now she understood, some things aren't meant to remain hidden forever, and sometimes salvation comes from places we least expect. Bigfoot's footprints led to an unmarked grave. The dense forest of Oregon's Cascade Range was quiet that evening, the kind of silence that felt heavy and unnatural. The sun had dipped below the horizon hours ago, leaving only a faint glow on the western edge of the sky. It was an ordinary night for most people in the small town of Timber Ridge, but not for John Carter, a local hiker who often ventured into the woods alone. He loved the solitude, the peace, and the chance to escape from the chaos of modern life. Little did he know that this particular journey would lead him down a path no one could have predicted. John set out at dusk, his flashlight cutting through the darkness as he followed a narrow trail that snaked its way through towering pines and ancient oaks. The air was cool, carrying with it the earthy scent of damp leaves and moss. His boots crunched softly against the ground, each step deliberate and measured. As he walked deeper into the forest, something unusual caught his eye: a series of large footprints pressed deeply into the soft soil. They were far too big to belong to any known animal or human. Unless, of course, they belonged to Bigfoot. He paused, his heart quickening slightly. This must be some prank, he muttered to himself, though deep down he couldn't shake the feeling that these tracks were real. The prints continued further along the trail, leading him farther away from the safety of the main path. Despite the growing unease in his chest, curiosity got the better of him. He decided to follow them, telling himself he'd turn back if anything seemed truly wrong. As John followed the mysterious footprints, the forest grew darker and more oppressive. The trees seemed to lean inward, their branches forming a canopy overhead that blocked out what little moonlight there was. The temperature dropped noticeably, and a chill ran down his spine. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted eerily, its call echoing through the stillness. He stopped momentarily to check his compass, ensuring he hadn't wandered off course. Everything appeared normal except those enormous footprints ahead of him. After about 30 minutes of walking, the trail abruptly ended at the base of a massive redwood tree. There, surrounded by ferns and fallen logs, lay something that made John freeze, a makeshift cross carved into the bark of the tree. It looked old, weathered by time and exposure to the elements. Beneath it, written in faded letters, were the words, "Rest in peace." "What is this?" John whispered, his voice trembling slightly. A strange sensation crept over him, like being watched. He glanced around nervously, shining his flashlight into the shadows, but saw nothing. Still, the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Something wasn't right here. Then he noticed another detail: the footprints didn't stop at the tree. Instead, they circled around it before disappearing entirely. Confused and increasingly uneasy, John crouched down to examine the area more closely. That's when he found an unmarked grave hidden beneath layers of dirt and pine needles. His stomach churned as he realized the significance of what he'd stumbled upon. Why was there a grave so deep in the woods? And why had no one ever mentioned it? His mind raced with questions, but before he could dwell on them too long, a sound broke the silence: a low growl, distant yet unmistakable. John froze again, his breath catching in his throat. Slowly, he turned his head toward the source of the noise. Through the gloom, he thought he saw movementa, dark shape moving between the trees. Panic surged within him, and without hesitation, he scrambled to his feet and began running back the way he came. The forest seemed alive now, every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs magnified tenfold. John's flashlight beam darted wildly as he pushed himself faster, adrenaline fueling his escape. Behind him, the growling grew louder, closer. He dared not look back, fearing what he might see. All he could focus on was reaching the safety of the main trail. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he burst through the underbrush and onto the familiar path. Collapsing against a nearby boulder, he tried to catch his breath, his chest heaving. For several minutes, all he could hear was the pounding of his own heartbeat. But then, just as he began to calm down, he heard it, the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps approaching from behind. John bolted upright, fear gripping him anew. He sprinted down the trail, his legs burning with exertion. The footsteps followed relentlessly, closing the gap with alarming speed. Whatever it wasn't slowing down. Desperation clawed at him as he searched frantically for a place to hide. Up ahead, he spotted a hollow log partially buried in the ground. Without thinking twice, he dove inside, pulling dead branches and leaves over the entrance to conceal himself. For what felt like hours, he lay there, barely daring to breathe. The creature, whatever it was, passed close by, its presence almost palpable. The air seemed to vibrate with energy, and John swore he could feel its gaze lingering nearby. Finally, after an agonizing wait, the sounds faded into the distance, and he allowed himself to relax slightly. When dawn finally broke, painting the forest in hues of gold and orange, John emerged from his hiding spot, shaken but alive. He knew he needed to get out of the woods as quickly as possible. Along the way, he passed the same redwood tree where he'd discovered the grave. This time, however, the makeshift cross was gone, replaced by fresh scratches in the bark. Chills ran down his spine as he hurried past, never looking back. Back in Timber Ridge, John recounted his experience to anyone who would listen. Some dismissed it as mere imagination or a bad dream, while others listened intently, their expressions grim. One elderly man named Walter nodded knowingly when John described the location of the grave. "That place has been trouble for years," Walter said solemnly. "People disappear up there, and no one talks about it." John never returned to that part of the forest. In fact, he sold his house in Timber Ridge shortly afterward and moved across the country, unable to shake the memory of that night. To this day, he wonders if the footprints really belonged to Bigfooter, if there was something even darker lurking in those woods. Missing Camper's final video shows a Sasquatch. The forest of Blackwater National Park was eerily silent that night. The stars twinkled faintly above, casting an almost ghostly glow over the dense trees and underbrush. It was 10:45 p.m. when Emily Carter set up her final video recording in the remote area known as Whispering Pines Campsite. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke into the camera. "This is my last attempt to capture anything unusual. I feel like I'm being watched." She paused, looking around nervously. The air felt heavy, oppressive even, with a chilling wind rustling through the branches. Emily had been camping alone for 3 days, determined to find evidence of the legendary Sasquatch that supposedly roamed these woods. Local folklore whispered tales of massive, hairy creatures watching from the shadows, but most dismissed them as mere legend. Yet something about this place unsettled her deeply. Every creak of a branch or distant howl made her heart race faster than before. At 11:17 p.m., her camera captured what would become the most debated piece of footage in modern history. As she panned the camera slowly across the clearing, the initial images showed nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual forest scenery bathed in moonlight. But then, at the edge of the frame near Old Willow Tree, a shadow moved unnaturally fast. Emily gasped audibly on the recording. What was that? She zoomed in quickly, revealing a figure standing approximately 8 feet tall, covered in dark fur. Its eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, reflecting the dim light of her flashlight. The creature stood perfectly still, observing her with an intensity that sent shivers down Emily's spine. For several long seconds, they locked gazes through the lens of her camera. Then, without warning, it vanished into the trees so swiftly it seemed almost supernatural. Emily stammered, I don't know what just happened. That thing. It wasn't human. Her hands shook visibly as she lowered the camera, fear evident in every word. Moments later, another sound echoed through the forest, low growls emanating from multiple directions. Emily packed her gear hurriedly, panic rising with each passing second. "I need to get out of here," she muttered, trying to keep her voice steady. As she turned off the camera for the final time that night, strange noises surrounded her. Snapping twigs, crunching leaves, and deep guttural sounds unlike anything she'd ever heard before. When search parties found Emily's abandoned campsite 2 days later, there was no sign of her anywhere. All they discovered was the damaged remains of her tent, scattered belongings, and the chilling video footage she'd recorded. Investigators noted peculiar tracks leading away from the site, much larger than any known animal species, but dismissed them officially as bear prints despite their unusual pattern. Back in town, locals exchanged uneasy glances upon hearing the news. Many remembered similar disappearances throughout the decades, always occurring during full moons near Whispering Pines. Some spoke of seeing towering figures moving silently between the trees late at night, while others claimed to have heard haunting screams coming from deep within the forest. These stories were often met with skepticism, yet now they carried new weight after Emily's disappearance. Months passed, and theories abounded regarding her fate. Cryptozoologists analyzed the video frame by frame, debating whether the creature caught on film could indeed be evidence of Sasquatch existence. Skeptics argued it was merely a well-placed costume or optical illusion caused by lighting conditions. However, none could explain the sheer terror etched onto Emily's face as she confronted whatever lurked in those woods. 1 year later, hikers stumbled upon something disturbing deep within Blackwater National Park. Remnants of clothing believed to belong to Emily, partially buried beneath fallen leaves and moss. Nearby, more mysterious footprints dotted the soft earth, some nearly twice the size of normal human steps. Authorities sealed off the area indefinitely, citing safety concerns for future visitors venturing too far off designated trails. Today, the story of Emily Carter serves as both cautionary tale and enduring mystery among outdoor enthusiasts nationwide. Those brave enough to visit Whispering Pines campsite report eerie sensations, feelings of being watched, unexplained noises, and sometimes glimpses of fleeting movement just beyond reach of sight. Rangers warn against overnight stays in the vicinity due to numerous reports of unsettling encounters since Emily's vanishing act. For many Americans, especially those living near wooded regions where such legends thrive, the possibility of Sasquatch remains tantalizingly real. Whether mythical beast or misunderstood creature, its presence continues to haunt our collective imagination. And perhaps somewhere deep within Blackwater National Park, amidst ancient trees and shadowy clearings, Emily's unanswered questions linger alongside the cryptic entity that took her away that fateful night. Bigfoot stalked our camp for 3 nights. It was a chilly autumn evening in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State. The air smelled of pine and damp earth as we set up camp near Lake Wenatchee. A group of 5 friends, Mark, Jake, Emily, Tom, and Lisa had decided to spend their long weekend exploring this remote wilderness area known for its breathtaking views and serene surroundings. Little did they know that their adventure would turn into something far more terrifying than any of them could have imagined. We arrived at the lake just before sunset on Friday. The golden light cast long shadows across the forest floor, creating an almost magical atmosphere. We chose a spot about half a mile from the water's edge, surrounded by towering fir trees. It felt like stepping into another world, a place untouched by civilization. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply, and the sounds of the forest came alive around us. Crickets chirped rhythmically, owls hooted in the distance, and occasionally the wind rustled through the branches above. On our first night, everything seemed normal. We gathered around the campfire, sharing stories and laughing under the starlit sky. But sometime after midnight, when most of us were already asleep inside our tents, strange noises began to echo through the woods. At first, it sounded like branches snapping far off in the distance. Then came deeper thuds, as if something heavy was walking nearby. Mark woke up startled and whispered loudly enough to wake everyone else. "Did you hear that?" Everyone sat bolt upright, hearts pounding. We unzipped one side of the tent cautiously and peered outside. The moonlight illuminated patches of the forest, but nothing moved within sight. Still, the unsettling feeling lingered. For the rest of the night, none of us slept soundly. Every creak or groan of the trees made us jump. By dawn, we convinced ourselves it must have been bears or other wildlife roaming the area. Saturday passed without incident during daylight hours. We spent the day hiking along trails near the lake, marveling at the vibrant colors of fall leaves blanketing the ground. Yet as dusk approached, the tension returned. That evening, while preparing dinner over the fire, we noticed unusual tracks in the soft soil near the edge of our campsite. They weren't bear prints nor deer hooves. These were enormous footprints, nearly twice the size of a human's, with distinct toe marks. Our laughter faded instantly, replaced by uneasy silence. As darkness enveloped the forest once again, the eerie sounds resumed. This time, however, they were closer, much closer. Branches cracked right outside our tents. Leaves crunched beneath unseen feet. Heavy breathing echoed faintly through the stillness. Panic bubbled up among us. No one dared step out of their tent. Instead, we stayed huddled together, clutching flashlights and whatever makeshift weapons we could find. Each noise sent shivers down our spines. The second night stretched endlessly. Sleep eluded us entirely as we listened intently to every movement outside. Around 3 a.m., a loud crash shook the entire camp. Something had knocked over one of our chairs near the fire pit. Then came a guttural growl, not angry, but rather curious and low-pitched. It sent chills racing up my spine. My hands trembled, holding the flashlight beam steady toward the source of the sound. Nothing showed up in the narrow circle of light. By Sunday morning, exhaustion weighed heavily on all of us. We debated whether to leave immediately or stay put until dark. Reluctantly, we agreed to pack up quickly and head back to civilization. However, fate had other plans. During breakfast preparation, another round of mysterious noises started. Only now, these weren't random. They followed a pattern. Whoever or whatever was out there circled our camp methodically, pausing periodically as though observing us. At this point, fear gripped us tightly. Communication between us became strained, short sentences filled with urgency. "What do we do?" "Stay calm," someone replied, though their voice quivered noticeably. Time slowed down as each second brought new anxiety. Finally, mid-afternoon, we managed to dismantle our gear and load everything onto backpacks. Before departing, we scanned the dense foliage surrounding us one last time. There, hidden partially behind a tree trunk, stood a shadowy figure watching silently. Too tall to be human, covered in thick fur, eyes glowing faintly in reflection of sunlight filtering through canopy. Without hesitation, we fled down the trail as fast as possible. Adrenaline fueled our steps despite fatigue setting in. Looking back confirmed the creature maintained a safe distance behind us, matching our pace effortlessly. Hours later, upon reaching safety at Ranger Station miles away, relief washed over us, mixed with disbelief. Rangers listened patiently to our tale, nodding sympathetically. Some believed us, others didn't. Regardless, those 3 nights remain etched forever in our Memorician encounter no amount of rationalization can erase. Mysterious lights over campsite, then she vanished. It was a crisp autumn evening in the heart of Colorado's Rocky Mountains. The sun had dipped below the jagged peaks, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. A young woman named Emily sat by her campfire at Willow Creek Campground, enjoying the serenity that only nature could provide. Her tent was pitched just a few feet away, its nylon walls glowing faintly from the firelight. The air was cool, carrying the earthy scent of pine needles and damp soil. Emily had always loved camping. It was her escape from the bustling city life of Denver, where she worked as a graphic designer. She arrived earlier that day, setting up her gear under the watchful gaze of towering evergreens. As night fell, the stars began to appear, their brilliance undiminished by city lights. It was one of those nights when the universe seemed closer, more tangible. Around 8:45 p.m., as Emily sipped her hot cocoa, she noticed something unusual in the distance. Across the clearing, beyond the tree line, there were lights. Not the steady glow of headlights or lanterns, but rather flickering orbs that danced unpredictably. They were too high for flashlights and too erratic for vehicles. Emily's curiosity was piqued. Pause with intrigue. She grabbed her flashlight and approached cautiously, careful not to step on twigs that might alert whatever or whoever was out there. The lights seemed to react to her movement, retreating further into the forest. It was as if they were playing a game of hide-and-seek. Emily felt a mixture of fear and fascination. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears. Pause with tension. At around 9:15 p.m., Emily found herself deeper in the woods than she intended. The lights had led her to an old, abandoned logging trail. The path was overgrown, barely visible beneath layers of fallen leaves and moss. Suddenly, the lights stopped moving. They hovered silently, forming a peculiar pattern that resembled constellations. Emily froze, unsure whether to advance or retreat. The atmosphere shifted dramatically. The usual sounds of the forest, the rustling leaves, the occasional hoot of an owl were gone. It was an unnatural silence, heavy and oppressive. Emily's breath came in shallow gasps. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone to call for help. But there was no signal, just static. Pause with despair. Then, without warning, the lights descended. They moved so quickly that Emily barely had time to react. One moment she was standing. The next, she felt a strange sensation, like being pulled through water. The world around her blurred, colors swirling into an indistinct mass. When the sensation passed, Emily was no longer in the forest. She stood in what appeared to be a cavern, its walls glowing faintly with the same light she had been following. The temperature dropped significantly. Her breath formed clouds in front of her face. The air smelled metallic, almost sterile. Emily called out, her voice trembling, but there was no response. Only echoes returned her cries. She noticed strange symbols etched into the rock walls, patterns that defied any language she recognized. Panic set in as she realized she couldn't remember how she got here. Or why. Pause with confusion. Hours soar, perhaps minutes passed in this surreal environment. Time seemed distorted. Emily wandered aimlessly, searching for an exit. At some point, she stumbled upon a large chamber filled with hovering spheres of light. They pulsed rhythmically, emitting soft tones that resonated deep within her chest. It was both mesmerizing and terrifying. Emily felt drawn to them, unable to resist their pull. As she reached out, everything went black. Back at Willow Creek Campground, park rangers discovered Emily's abandoned campsite the following morning. Her belongings were untouched, as if she had simply vanished into thin air. Search parties scoured the area for days, but there was no trace of her. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing. It was as if the forest had swallowed her whole. Missing boy found alive in unlikely place. The small town of Willow Creek, nestled in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, was no stranger to whispers of strange occurrences. It was a place where legends were born and secrets lingered in the shadows of towering pines. On an evening that seemed like any other, the air carried a chilling breeze as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. The clock struck 7, and the residents of Willow Creek gathered at the local community center for what would become one of the most unforgettable nights in their history. It all began when 8-year-old Ethan Carter went missing. His disappearance happened so suddenly that it left everyone in disbelief. Ethan had been playing near his home on Maple Street, just a stone's throw away from the forest edge. His mother, Karen, recalled seeing him last around 5:30 p.m., laughing and chasing after butterflies in the backyard. By 6:00 p.m., when she called out for him to come inside for dinner, there was no response. She searched the house, the yard, and even knocked on a few neighbors' doors, but Ethan was nowhere to be found. As word spread through the close-knit community, panic set in. Sheriff Tom Henderson arrived promptly, organizing a search party consisting of volunteers, police officers, and even some curious teenagers eager to help. The initial focus was the dense woods behind Ethan's house, a place many children frequented during warmer months. However, as hours passed, the search proved fruitless. Darkness fell quickly over the mountains, casting long shadows across the landscape. Flashlights flickered among the trees, illuminating patches of underbrush but offering no sign of the missing boy. By midnight, the temperature dropped sharply, and the wind howled through the branches like a mournful cry. Despite the cold, the search continued relentlessly. Dogs sniffed the ground, trying to pick up Ethan's scent, while helicopters buzzed overhead, their spotlights cutting through the darkness. Yet, every lead ended in disappointment. Some suggested he might have wandered deeper into the forest, possibly disoriented or injured. Others whispered about something more sinister, something that locals preferred not to talk about openly. Willow Creek had its share of dark tales, passed down through generations. Stories spoke of a mysterious figure known only as the Watcher, who supposedly roamed the woods at night, preying on those who ventured too far from safety. Though dismissed by most as mere folklore, these stories resurfaced in hushed conversations among the townsfolk that evening. Fear mingled with determination as they pressed on, hoping against hope that Ethan was still alive. At dawn, the search resumed with renewed vigor. This time, however, attention turned to areas less expected. One volunteer, Mark Rivers, proposed checking abandoned buildings scattered throughout the outskirts of town. Among them was the old mill, a crumbling structure located near the riverbank. Once a bustling hub of activity, it now stood silent and desolate, its windows shattered and walls covered in moss. Few dared approach it due to its eerie reputation, but desperation drove the group toward it. Inside the mill, the atmosphere was oppressive. Dust hung thick in the air, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed off the walls. Shadows danced eerily in the dim light filtering through broken panes. As they combed through each room, a peculiar noise caught their attention, a soft whimpering coming from the basement. With hearts pounding, they descended the creaking stairs, flashlights cutting through the gloom. There, huddled in the corner of a dusty alcove, sat Ethan. His clothes were torn and his face smeared with dirt, but he was alive. Relief washed over the rescuers, though it was tinged with confusion and unease. How had Ethan ended up here? More unsettling was the realization that someone or something had kept him hidden. Evidence suggested deliberate effort. Blankets arranged neatly beside him, food wrappers scattered nearby, and strange carvings etched into the wooden beams above. Ethan's condition raised more questions than answers. When questioned gently by Sheriff Henderson, the boy recounted fragments of his ordeal. He remembered wandering into the woods, becoming lost amid the towering trees. Then, he spoke of a mantle, shadowy and unnervingly calm, who appeared seemingly out of nowhere. This man led Ethan to the mill, claiming it was safe and warm. Ethan couldn't explain why he trusted him, only that something about the man felt oddly familiar, as if he'd seen him before in dreams. Further investigation revealed additional anomalies. Footprints leading to the mill matched neither Ethan's nor those of the search party members. A single boot print remained near the entrance, impossibly large and deeply embedded in the hard-packed earth. Inside the mill, investigators discovered remnants of candles placed strategically around the space, forming patterns that defied logic. Most disturbingly, a journal was found tucked beneath a loose floorboard. Its pages contained cryptic entries written in a hand unfamiliar to anyone in town. References to the Chosen and Guardians of the Threshold littered the text, hinting at rituals performed within the mill's confines. Word of Ethan's rescue spread rapidly, bringing both relief and unease to Willow Creek. While celebrations erupted in some corners of the town, others grew increasingly wary. Parents warned their children to stay clear of the woods, and late-night gatherings dwindled as paranoia took root. Theories abounded regarding Ethan's captor, ranging from a reclusive hermit living in the wilderness to supernatural entities drawn to vulnerable souls. Months later, the case remained unsolved. Authorities pursued leads but ultimately concluded that without concrete evidence, little could be done. Ethan returned to school, though changes in his behavior became apparent. He became quieter, often staring off into the distance, with an expression that suggested he saw things no one else could. At night, he claimed to hear whispers calling his name, urging him back to the mill. For the people of Willow Creek, life slowly returned to normaler, as normal as it could be given the lingering mystery. Yet, whenever the wind swept through the valley, carrying with it the scent of pine and damp earth, memories of that fateful night resurfaced. And deep within the forest, amidst the rustling leaves and chirping crickets, the legend of the Watcher lived on, waiting patiently for another soul to claim. Pause here. Let the silence sink in. Let listeners feel the weight of uncertainty hanging heavy in the air. Though Ethan was found alive, the true nature of his ordeal remains shrouded in mystery. Was it human intervention or something far beyond comprehension? The question lingers, haunting the minds of those who dare delve too deeply into the secrets of Willow Creek. As years pass, new generations grow up hearing tales of the boy who vanished and the unlikely place where he was found. But perhaps the greatest mystery lies not in what happened to Ethan, but rather in what continues to watch from the shadows, unseen yet ever present. The woods went silent before he disappeared. The woods went silent before he disappeared. It was a crisp autumn evening in the small town of Black Hollow, nestled deep within the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. The sun had dipped below the horizon just an hour ago, casting long shadows across the forest that surrounded the community. A chill hung in the air, and the leaves crunched underfoot as people made their way home from work or school. This was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, where children played freely outside until twilight called them back indoors. But on this particular night, something felt off. The name John Carter wasn't unfamiliar to anyone in Black Hollow. He was the local park ranger who had dedicated over 2 decades of his life to preserving the wilderness surrounding the town. With his weathered face and warm smile, he was beloved by all, always ready with advice for hikers or stories about the animals that roamed the woods. That day, however, John ventured deeper into the forest than usual. It was supposed to be a routine checkup of some old logging trails that hadn't been used in years, but it would turn out to be anything but ordinary. At precisely 6:15 p.m., John sent a quick text message to his wife, Emily, heading out for a short patrol, shouldn't take more than an hour. Those were the last words she ever received from him. By 8:00 p.m., when he still hadn't returned, Emily began to worry. She tried calling his phone multiple times, but there was no answer. The signal in those parts of the forest could sometimes be spotty, so she decided to wait another hour before contacting anyone else. But as the clock struck 9, her unease grew into full-blown panic. By then, several neighbors had noticed John's absence too. Word spread quickly through the tight-knit community, and soon enough, a search party was organized. Armed with flashlights and radios, a group of 10 volunteers set off into the woods, following the faint trail John might have taken. The atmosphere was tense. Even the rustling of leaves seemed louder than usual. As they walked, one member of the group pointed out how unusually quiet the forest had become. No chirping crickets, no hooting owls, not even the distant call of a fox. Just silence. This eerie stillness unnerved everyone, and whispers of unease rippled through the group. One man suggested turning back, saying the woods didn't feel right tonight. Another disagreed, reminding everyone why they were here. They pressed on, their footsteps crunching against the carpet of fallen leaves. After about 20 minutes, they reached the edge of a clearing where John's truck sat abandoned. Its headlights were off, and the keys were still in the ignition. Everything looked normal except